This is Where We Land, a podcast bringing together stories of immigration and multicultural identity. I'm Claudia.
And I'm Luciana.
We're originally from Peru, so we have a pretty good idea of what living between two cultures is like. But we believe that no matter where you come from, immigrating to the U.S. is an experience rich with duality and meaning. Join us as we speak with immigrants from all over the world about their journey and how it shaped who they are today.
In this episode, we discuss what happens to your relationships with the friends and family you leave behind when you immigrate. How do these relationships evolve and take on new meaning? How do you keep them going? Why do some fall off? And do they all have to change?
We also talk about not going home for Christmas, having lunch in your cubicle by yourself, and the 1960s classic film, Pollyanna.
Let's dive into our conversation. To start off, we're going to give you a little culture clash flashback, which is a little culture clash we experienced sometime in our past. And I can start with this one. My culture flashback is lunchtime. When I immigrated again to the U.S. in 2014, and then I started working here shortly after, I experienced going to an office for the first time in the U.S. I had had most of my professional career in Peru up to that point, and I had had jobs there in several companies and was very familiar with that work environment and social part that comes with work. Cut to my first day in my office here in New York, and it's a busy office. It's a tech company. Tech companies tend to be a little bit more laid back. You can wear jeans, a friendly environment, let's say, a really like lots of young employees. But lunchtime rolled around and everybody would kind of just pick up their lunch, either at the cafeteria where they were serving it, or some people would bring lunch and they would go and sit and eat it alone in their seat, cubicle, office, whatever. It's usually mostly open space, but basically everybody was eating in their desk. And to me,
Horrifying.
This was like, what? Exactly.
That sounds like a horror film.
Right? Like, I just looked around and, like, mind you, no one was being, like, everyone's still really friendly. It's like getting their lunch. And I guess, like, that's a moment of interaction when you're, like, in the line getting your food. But then you just go and you work more during lunch. Like, my mind was blown. I just did not get it. And mind you, I had kind of heard that this was the culture here. You just eat at your desk, which sounds so...
It sounds very sad.
It's sad. It's really isolating. Like, it's very normal here, but just like polar opposite of what my work experience had been in Peru, where, you take lunch or you go and get lunch, but you do it and you eat with people, with your colleagues. Or even if and this is like really just also about like the food, right? That there's so many good, non-expensive food available in Peru.
Yes.
So you'll find these little hole-in-the-walls around very fancy offices where people just go and have a bite. Like, no one's going to get fast food. You're sitting, you're having a plate, fork, knife. There's a waiter bringing you the food.
Yep.
But they're cheap places, and you're sitting and you're having a meal, and you are sitting for no less than 30 minutes. At the minimum.
No less than 30 minutes.
That's a quick
of course.
one, and this is across, like, in the office industry, right? Because, like, let's focus. This is like a 9-to-5 job, what I'm comparing to the New York, the DC, and Peru. And it's just, you have a conversation. There is no, and it's not about work. It's never about work.
No.
It is like, maybe if there's like something super important.
If there's something juicy going on, or a deadline or something, sure.
A deadline, sure. Like, you will maybe have to work through lunch, but it is rare. It is so rare. And that was just like bananas to me. I'm used to it now, but I still find it sad.
It's very sad. I love that about Peru. That's one of the things that I really, really liked about the work culture there was lunch is a break. Like, let's call it what it is.
Break.
It's a break. So no one wants to spend their one big break, like, sitting in the office. You're going to go back. You're going to go right back. Let's not spend. That's like if you're a kid and you're spending a recess sitting in your classroom chair. Like,
Right.
why? Why?
Right.
Why? Go
Right.
outside. Go
I
outside,
know.
breathe fresh air,
I
play with the
know.
other kids, talk to them. Yeah, they're your classmates, but they can be your friends. Like, go out and talk. Like, yeah, so I really liked that about Peru. And I think it extends even beyond lunch. Like, lunch is definitely this this thing that represents the culture. But I think it extends beyond. Like, Peruvian office culture is very chatty. It's very much like, we're gonna go make coffee, and when we're making coffee, we're gonna chat everyone up. Like,
Yeah. And I would say, I worked in Mexico City for 2 years. Same experience, lunch there as Peru. And obviously there is an element to like productivity, like the US, especially when I think about that job in New York. Like New York, like everyone is working hard, what it
yeah,
feels like 24/7.
yeah.
That's a trade-off,
It's
right?
hustle culture.
That was a big culture clash for me. Like 8 years ago. I'm still like reminded of it, but I am definitely more used to it now.
I feel ya. So my culture clash flashback is actually it's a movie character trope. In the 90s and early 2000s, I remember seeing this trope in movies of a character that lives far away from their family, usually in another state, and is single and hasn't seen their parents in years. And the
Oh,
mom
right.
keeps leaving them messages on their answering machine or on their cell phone asking if they can make it back home for Christmas this year, because they haven't spent Christmas together in like 5 years, and they haven't talked in forever or seen them, and how are they? And as a Peruvian kid, I remember being so confused because in Peru, it doesn't matter how far away from your parents you live, or how much you don't like your parents right now,
Right.
or what family member you're fighting with, or you're all spending Christmas together. Like, you are getting your ass back home to your family home for Christmas, and you will sit there with your mom and dad, whether you want to or not. Like, it's just going to happen. Now, of course, I know that this trope probably only reflects like a little tiny portion of American reality. It is just mainly a screenwriting gimmick. I realize that now. I realize that like screenwriters were like, we need to show that this character isn't in the best version of themselves right now.
Right,
How
right.
do we do this?
It's
Like,
isolated.
the
Yeah.
movie 13 Going on 30 comes to mind, where she like grows up to not be such a great person. And a way that they show that is that she hasn't spent Christmas with her parents in forever and she doesn't talk to them anymore. I saw this trope so many times that I really thought as a kid, wow, in the States, people really like move out of their house at 18 and never look back.
Yes.
Wow, man, that's rough.
Yes, yes. When you just said this phrase, they move out of their house at 18 and never look back. I think that is an idea in America that it's like, oh, it's over after 18 and you will likely not see your family. You will rarely speak to them. And that's just like after living here, I'm like, well,
It's not
that's
true.
not true.
No, the
I
movies
wonder,
fooled
it's
me.
the
I was
movies.
fooled.
It's
I
the
was fooled by
the
the
movies
movies.
are fooling us, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah.
Hollywood tricked me. It
Yeah.
really did. I really believed it, and I was scared. I'm like, thank God I live in Peru and my family's not gonna kick me out and never see me again. Today's topic of the week is how your relationships with the family and friends you leave behind change when you immigrate. Anyone who has ever moved out of their hometown will understand that it's hard to keep your deep connections with all the family members and friends that you care about from back home, right? Especially if, like, now you live in a different time zone and you can't visit very often. Whether you're an immigrant or not, this is something a lot of us have experienced. However, I think for immigrants, there is this added layer because keeping that connection with your family and friends is also a way of keeping a connection to your country. So, staying in touch with people is also an opportunity for you to speak in your native language and to hear about the friends and the celebrations and the food that was eaten and the music that was danced to. It's a way to like vicariously experience your culture and feel that you're still like tethered to your country.
In thinking about how your relationships change, some for me have become a lot closer. Some have faded, maybe some are gone, and maybe that's just also age and shedding different types of life, different stages. But I think like in immigrating, what happens is like it definitely becomes clear which relationships are the important ones because you only have a limited amount of time for friendship.
Yeah.
You're making relationships, friendships, connections in this new country.
Yeah.
It is the opposite of what you're trying to achieve in building community in the US and building up friends and family to try to continue to stay so connected to the other group. Like if you're permanently immigrating, you're going to have to let go of that a bit and kind of just because you are so actively trying to build those friendships here. So time. So that just puts in perspective what is more important.
I agree with you. Like on a personal level, my relationships with friends and family back home have definitely changed, and some have grown closer, as you said. I have friends that I've really come to appreciate because they really make the effort to stay in touch with me and to check in with me and to keep me in the loop and keep me in part of the Peruvian friend group. And I really, really appreciate that. We're still like hanging on to a close friendship, not just like keeping in touch. Like we're still hanging on to a close friendship.
Yeah, I relate to that. I have friends that I'm like, oh, I'm seeing you in a different light because through the years, they've really made effort. And I'm like, oh, I have more. And I guess that relates to when you're building friendships here too, right? The friend that keeps reaching out and inviting you just every, well, maybe I should give this person a shot.
A shot.
You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I also think with some family members, especially like our cousins of all varying degrees, because we have
Mhm.
cousins that are like, oh, you were my dad's cousin, or you were my,
Yeah.
So cousins of all varying degrees, and also with aunts and uncles, they've almost become like recontextualized in my head because they used to just be, oh, that's my cousin or that's my uncle. And now they're like the people around which I feel almost like the most Peruvian because we have no more living grandparents, you and I. So when I talk to people who grew up around our grandparents, like calling them aunt and uncle, they have all these great stories about them that they share. That makes me feel really connected, like to my past, of course, and to my family, but it also makes me feel really connected to Peru. Um, because we have like our grandparents who and other family members that are like from the Andes of Peru, and like I don't get to, even when I go back to Peru, I don't get to experience that part of Peru that much anymore because that's not where our family lives. So whenever I get to be around these people that like they knew our grandparents when they were growing up in the Andes and they have all the stories, I'm like, oh, this makes me feel very connected.
I think for anyone, not just immigrants, the pandemic probably pushed this even like the relationships with the people, obviously front and center. I know it did for me, not being able to travel to Peru. It did this for a lot of immigrants, just keeping track of how your country was faring during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I had more face to face video calls because of that pandemic with family members than I would have
Yeah.
otherwise. I think I became closer to family members in the pandemic when I couldn't see them. Someone was telling me, like, if we didn't connect in the pandemic, like, we're just probably never going to connect again. And that's so true.
That's so true. Harsh but true. Harsh facts. Harsh facts.
It's like that, you know?
Well, the same thing can be said for immigrating. If I move to another country and we lose touch, babe, yeah, maybe you were my friend from Peru. Okay, I have a friend who lives here in the US, was planning his wedding back home in Peru. And he was, of course, talking with some family members who were like the boots on the ground that were helping him plan it, right? And he got some backlash from a few family members when all the references he sent for his wedding were all American. And so some of his aunts and uncles made comments like, oh, you don't like Peruvian things anymore, huh? You only
Oh,
like
yeah.
American things now.
Oh my
And
God.
most of them were just like teasing and poking fun at the fact that this isn't what Peruvian weddings look like, That
Yeah.
was the extent of it. But he did tell me there was one cousin who was like genuinely upset that he
Oh my
didn't include more
gosh.
Peruvian things. And I think situations like that, when people get upset, I don't think they're upset because you have new taste in wedding references.
No, it's clearly something about them first,
Of course,
right?
I think they're upset
This
because
cousin, what's going on?
yeah, but I think they're upset because they're seeing a new side of you and they don't yet know if that's a good thing or not. When a friend or family member changes, that can like trigger different emotions in people. Like some people might feel like, oh, I feel left behind, or I feel like we used to be the same and now we're not the same. So maybe does that mean we're not as close anymore? Am I losing you as a friend? Or you can feel
Like
less
their
than
identity is impacted or
in
threatened or
some
something
way.
by
Yeah.
you
You can
being
maybe
now this US person.
yeah, people or some people might feel like jealous because you've been exposed to new things and I haven't, or I feel less than because you're different and I've stayed the same, or I feel like your values have changed. I have this friend from Ecuador who wasn't openly gay in Ecuador, and then he moved to the States, and now he's openly gay, been here for several years now, and he's, of course, openly gay on social media as well. And some of his friends from Ecuador were like, peace out, can't be friends with you anymore.
Gosh.
So it can
Oof.
stir up a whole bunch of emotions, you changing in a small way or a really big way.
Yeah. Relatable, because we will all adopt, as immigrants in the US, we will all adopt Americanisms, that are part of us right now, that they become us. And
Yeah, as a human being, you get changed by your surroundings. You just do. You can't help but be influenced. And so if you've been living in the States for a while now, yeah, you're gonna pick up the ways people dress here, or the way people, if you've been invited to a couple of weddings here, when you plan your wedding, you're gonna be like, well, I liked this from my friend Stacy's wedding, so I'm gonna do that for mine. Like,
yeah,
why not?
exactly. And just, you're gonna get some judgment, you're gonna get some unhappy people, I guess, or like just people that are like, wait, what is this change?
Yeah, and I think it's like, even if you've never immigrated somewhere, like, I think everyone can think of like, oh, I have a friend who moved to California and now she believes in horoscopes. What's that about? It can be as simple
Right.
as that. Like,
Right.
and yeah, you might want to make fun of them and you probably will here and there. But overall, like, if they're a close friend of yours, you'll be like, yeah, my friend believes in horoscopes now,
Right. No
What you
harm
gonna
to
do?
you.
She lives
Right.
in California,
Right.
That's what they do there.
They're
Yeah.
vegetarian now,
Yeah, that can happen. Yeah.
It is hard when it's someone, close to you. Like, I'm thinking of elder family members. I think it's harder for them to be open-minded about like the changes that they will see in you. And I think that that might be hard generationally. Grandparents, if you immigrated here young,
Yeah.
and then, I'm reminded of our grandparents and when we would go back and they basically would say, like, oh my gosh, I have little American granddaughters. And to them, that would be so foreign.
I mean, for our grandfather, even like I just remember like the fact that we wanted new tennis shoes for him was just like,
Right.
what are you talking about? New? What do you mean new?
Right.
Where I come from, like,
Yeah.
and that's not a Peruvian thing or an
No,
American thing. That
that's-
was just like, but he was very much like, oh yeah, you've accustomed them in America. Everyone gets new things. Like the new school year, everyone gets new shoes. You've accustomed them. You've made them like, now they expect new shoes at the beginning of every school year. That's such an American thing. And I'm like, I don't know if that's American or not, but I
Right.
get that. Like, and he would be like, yeah, where I come from, we use
That might
shoes
just be
until they stopped
generational,
being
but-
shoes. Like, he would run his shoes to the ground, remember?
For sure.
And we would buy him new pairs and he wouldn't wear them because he was like, the old ones are still working.
Next up is our current faves, where we share a word, phrase, food, place, or thing, either Peruvian or American, that we're currently loving, craving, or missing. My current fave is probably very 2024, but I love it.
Oh, are you going to be a chuggy millennial right now?
Vibes.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh my gosh.
It's like, but this is why. I mean, obviously, like vibes, so cool. Like there were so many things that was just like, oh, just vibes, and it's just such a good way to describe. Like even when we talk about this show, like this podcast that we're doing, oh, but like the vibe is this, or like this doesn't go with our vibe. We use the word.
Wait. I need clarification because one thing, like, I understand if you're saying, oh, the vibe that we're going for is XYZ. I get that. But you said vibes.
I guess like in both. I guess both because
How do you use vibes? Like, give me an example because I need to see how much I want to judge you for this.
Like if I see something really fun or cool that I want to be a part of.
That's giving you
Good like,
vibes.
So a friend of mine, last summer we were doing swim lessons with the kids, and her daughter would like grab her floaty, I kid you not, put on her sunglasses, look back, and like her vibes, like, it was just like Vegas.
Okay. More like that's a vibe.
Yeah, but it was like, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm using it wrong, and then like, the internet will like kill me. I don't know. But
no, but you liked her vibes. She was giving off good vibes.
Yeah, she was giving off good vibes. I'm using it a lot right now, like 10 years ago.
Are you going to bring up that in Peru this was a word?
Yes.
15.
That's
what I was thinking
15 or 20 years ago, vibras,
Yes.
vibes, was our word. And we
Yes.
would use it 24/7.
Peru
In
was ahead of the
college.
curve, man. It was ahead of the
In
curve.
college, we would say vibras, and now I'm like, vibes, I get to use it now.
I know.
language.
It was like this big, also like a slang word that just caught on in Peruvian college culture at the time.
Yeah.
And everyone would say it. Everyone's like, and it was it's the same word with the same meaning and everything. So when it became popular here, when vibes became a thing in the States, I was like, oh, the only thing that kept going through my mind whenever I would hear someone say it here would be vibras, flaquita.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, if these people knew. So my current fave is a phrase
Okay.
in English as well.
Oh, look at us.
Look at us.
Matching.
Ugh,
Okay.
the Americans. It's actually a quote from a movie
Mhm.
that I use with my friends. The quote is, Pollyanna, can you come out and play?
Oh my God. No, stop.
Okay.
No. Stop.
To be
Pick
clear.
something else. Do
Nope.
over.
I'm sorry. It's true. I use it. I love it.
I
To
mean,
be-
you and I would use it as kids because we were obsessed with that movie.
Of course, and the actual quote, like the way the kid says it in the movie is, Pollyanna, can you come out and play? To be clear, I don't walk around saying this out loud to people. I'm not completely psychotic. I text it to my friends when I want to see them. So for me, Pollyanna, can you come out and play is the equivalent of texting, hey, let's hang out. If I haven't seen you in a while and I want to hang out, I will text you, Pollyanna, can you come out and play? And then my friends will be like, oh yeah, let's get to lunch in a couple of days or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The quote, for those of you who don't know, for those of you who didn't have the privilege of seeing our ratty old VHS tape that our mom bought for us.
So good.
The quote comes from the movie Pollyanna. It's an old movie from like 1960. I looked it up, 1960. It stars the lovely Haley Mills of The Parent Trap fame, the OG. This was one of those movies that, our mom randomly bought for us. We didn't even know it existed. We didn't ask for it.
I don't think we requested it. No.
No, she
But
just
became an instant
She would buy us
fave.
movies. She would buy us movies on
Yeah.
VHS for our collection.
Yeah.
And while it wasn't like one of our like absolute diehard favorites, it was part of our collection. Therefore, we saw it quite a few times growing
It was
up.
like on the roster. Like I may know it.
It was
by
on the
heart.
roster.
I may
It was
know
on
it
the
by
roster.
heart. Like
Oh, I totally know it by heart. And
Yeah.
we loved acting out the scene where she climbs a tree to sneak back into her room, but falls off and breaks her leg.
Yes, we would act out that
We would
scene.
reenact it because we had bunk beds. So your top bunk
Yes.
bed would be like the window, and we would fall off, and we
But
broke
we
our
would
legs.
also reenact
What?
the fair, and when she's fishing.
Oh, the fair! She goes to the fair. Yes. That was the best part of the movie. Was like that last third act where she like escapes, goes to the fair, has a ball. Such a good movie, but I've been using it lately. Things that I like, I don't care if people don't understand. I will use it.
Yeah.
If I like it, if I like saying it, I'm going to say it. So, Pollyanna, can you come out and play?
Vibes for me.
Pollyanna, can you come out and play is vibes.
Okay, so how did that land?
Okay, so I have a couple of things. When we were talking about the Christmas trope of like the person that doesn't come back home ever for Christmas, so that got me thinking from an immigrant point of view that like not coming home for Christmas is an actual thing that happens to a lot of immigrants. Not because they don't want to, but because they can't. And it's always either because, it's too expensive to go back home that time of year, prices for airlines like just skyrocket during that time, or you're waiting on documentation. You're just waiting on your document that allows you to exit and come back into the country. Sometimes you don't get them in time for the holidays, and that can be rough. And that can cause a bit of a strain to your relationships back home, not just because obviously you don't get to spend Christmas with family and the friends you want to see, but it could also affect your relationships back home because you have to explain why you're not going to be there that year. And that can be difficult to navigate in the sense that it doesn't matter how rational your reason is. It doesn't matter that it makes perfect sense that you're not going this year.
Uh-huh.
The people back home won't understand.
No.
Like they
No.
just won't because
No.
emotionally, they just want you there.
Yeah.
They just want to see you. They just want you there. Everyone else is coming home for Christmas. You should also be going home for Christmas. And that can be tricky to navigate because then I've had a couple of friends tell me stories of like, every time I talk to my mom, like it's December 7th and every day I'm talking to my mom and every day is the same thing. Why aren't you coming home this year?
Right.
And it's like, I have to stop calling her because like I don't want to keep having this
cannot
conversation.
explain this again. It is also the documentation, and that comes with so many layers that immigrants understand because we've been through the process of waiting for your travel permit, your green card, your whatever the document is that you need to get in and out and back into the country.
Yeah.
And those timeframes aren't the most reliable. USCIS, the organization that creates these documents for all of the immigrants, has like long wait times. And so sometimes you're, waiting 3 months, 6 months, a year plus, and just like explaining that over and over.
Yeah. And so it is something you have to, as an immigrant, it is something you have to navigate. Like, who am I going to tell? How much am I going to explain? How much will they understand? And then everyone else, I'll just have to deal with it if they choose to give me shit. For not going. Like, I will just see how I deal with everyone individually. Yeah.
And then furthermore, you have finite amount of time that you can take off. You want to go back home, but you also want to see other places. For me, on a personal level, it becomes like hard to just like, well, I need to allocate less time to Peru. And it really comes with a lot of things to navigate in terms of which friends I see, which friends I don't see, priorities. And that's hard for sure.
It's hard to do. It's like if you're not an immigrant, if you've never had to make this type of decisions, an equivalent that I find is when you are making the guest list for your wedding and you can only afford 90 people. That's it. That's all you can afford. The budget's been made. That's what you hired. If you invite person number 91, they have nowhere to sit. They have nothing to eat.
Right.
So
you literally cannot.
You have to. That is hard. Anyone who's planned a wedding knows that it is hard to make that guest list stick to a budgeted number. And you're going to feel bad. The person that didn't get invited is going to feel bad. But we all kind of understand because we've all been there. But we also have friends who don't understand and get emotional and get reactive of why they were excluded. And then there's the friend that is like, no, I perfectly understand. Weddings are expensive. I didn't get invited. Like, that's fine. So it's kind of that's the simile. Like not going home for Christmas, that's kind of the simile. People are like, oh, you're choosing not to come. Yeah. PSA for the friends and family, cut us some slack.
I know. And it's so hard for them. It's so hard for the person that's going through it because, of course, we would rather. You're constantly choosing between two places. You're
Yeah.
I've been here 10 years now as an adult, and it still feels really tricky. I don't have it. I guess you just have to be like really happy with your decision, really and just really not care what anyone else thinks.
There's an additional thing
Mhm.
that I reflected on as we were discussing today's episode. Really talking about how your relationships change when you're away got me thinking about the specific ways in which I stay in touch with
Mhm.
some of my friends and family back home. Basically, I have 4 things that I do. One is long voice notes. Just like long ass voice notes. Like I'm talking 18-minute voice notes where my friends are just like, "Thank you for the podcast. Ha ha ha." Yeah, like I will do this. I don't do it with every single friend, but there's like 5 to 6 friends that's how we just communicate. We don't text, we don't call, we don't Zoom. I just send an 18-minute voice note, they send a 20-minute one back. And it's not every day. We do this maybe once a month or once every 2 months, and it's throughout the entire year.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. The other thing that I've been doing is I have 1-hour Zoom catch-ups with a group. So I have 2 groups that I do this with
Okay.
only.
This feels like a quarterly meeting.
It is
Yeah.
basically.
Did this start in the pandemic?
No. This is something I only do I do it one with my group of school best friends from school. That's one of the groups. And the other group is a group of friends from college, girlfriends as well. And they're we're people that live like, not just me lives far away, but we kind of all live all over the world. So these are groups where it's like everyone has lost touch. And it's been working.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, it's a win post-pandemic. Like, I think post-pandemic, during the pandemic and post-pandemic, we have now all of these tools that immigrants can use. I just think back again to the time when we were little and like the call with your home country was scheduled. And this is like, I'm sure every immigrant in the 90s could relate.
Oh my
Right?
gosh, you had to figure out how to call internationally.
First
That was
of
like a whole
all,
thing. You had to
you had
learn how
to
to
figure out,
dial.
but we were children. Your parents were figuring it out. But it was a scheduled call on a Sunday. It's crazy. Like someone else has the exact same story. It was a Sunday evening call.
Yes.
Everybody would line up
Yep.
and you could say hello to your grandfather. Like, "Hi, grandfather, how are you?" It's kind of just to like pulse check. "Hi, you're okay." And then quickly hand it over to your sibling because it was so expensive.
So expensive. It was so ridiculously
And
expensive.
now we can talk unlimited video. What else? I mean, remember, we would be sending letters when we were, young children back to Peru. I don't think they ever made it because the donkey,
Yeah, of course. The donkey never made it. No, no.
But we were writing them.
Yeah. And the other thing, and I know that this is going to sound insane in the year of our Lord 2025, but I have a couple of friends who call me. Like it's a ritual. Like I have a friend who I will always pick up the phone for just because this is the only way I communicate with him. Like, and this started, mind you, I think the reason that it's carried on is because it started when we were both living in Peru, and anytime he called me, it was always to go out, to like propose he always has a cool plan. Him and his wife always plan really cool trips, really cool road trips, really cool parties,
I think
really
I
cool
remember
activities.
these people. I think.
Yeah, and so whenever he called, and he never texts, he calls. So when he calls, we were both living in Lima, I was like, oh, this is gonna be a fun time. He's gonna propose something interesting. So I would always pick up. Or if I saw a missed call, I would call him back as soon as I could. And once we established that dynamic of just never texting, but only calling each other back and forth, that just stuck. And that was pre-pandemic. So now that we both live in completely different cities, he's in London, I'm here in New York, whenever I see his name pop up on my phone, I don't care if I'm in the grocery store, I don't care what I'm doing. I'm picking up that phone if I can. And I'm like, what's up? Because I know now he's not going to propose a cool road trip or hanging out, but it's just our dynamic. That's how we communicate. Also, I think one of the things that is a through line for all the different types of communication working for me is that they don't happen often. And so they're a little pressure free. They're like every single one of these ways of communication happens between me and my friends every month or 2 months.
For sure.
My last thing that I do to keep connected, and this I only do with certain family members, is that I have a calendar reminder scheduled
Oh my
for
God.
every 12 days, or I
I
think it
know,
was 16
I know
days,
this one, and I'm like, I
to
can't.
remind me to call them.
No, that I
Um,
can't. Like,
No, I'm sorry. Maybe you don't need that. That's fine. But I do need that because I would not call like 911 if I had an emergency. That's how bad of a caller I am. You know what I mean? Like I'll just forget. I'll forget. I won't do it. I'm too
it's funny
preoccupied.
because it just explained 4 strategies that you have to be a good communicator, but yet
But
you
none
need
of
this
them, if
last
you've
one.
noticed, none of them involve me dialing a phone number. Also, none of them involve me texting anyone. I'm a terrible texter and I'm a terrible caller. That's just, and hey, I found strategies to stay communicated without having to do this. And yes, one of them means I have a calendar reminder to remind me to call some people that really need to be called.
I mean, you know what? I feel like for sure, there are people that's gonna speak to that it's like, "Oh my God, yes, that's me." Or like, "Oh my God, I need to call my mother," like, or just like or my grandma or like whatever. Like, it's great
I
for
think some listeners will be like, great idea, Claudia. Let me get on my calendar app right now.
you seem to have a system, but kind of like what we were saying earlier, the people that you wanna keep in touch with, you kinda just find a way to do it, you know? You find the
That's just
time.
not how my brain works. This is where we differ.
Yeah.
I can deeply care about someone, and I will forget they exist if their face is not in front of my face. I will forget they exist.
God.
And it doesn't even take me that long to forget a person's last name. I forget.
Hopefully, some of these strategies are helpful.
Good luck out there, guys.
Good luck. It's hard to keep in touch. That wraps it up for today. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode and check us out on Instagram at Where We Land Pod. Ciao, ciao.
Hasta la vista, babies. At Where We Land, we know some immigrant experiences are harder than others, especially for those in the margins of our current legal system. If you would like to help, we encourage you to support organizations that provide services for immigrants and champion their rights. You can find a list of the organizations in the show notes.